To get some more information now about how significant this could potentially be, I'm joined by two industry insiders. Flavio Volpe is the president of the Canadian Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, of which Honda Trading Canada is incorporated and a member, I should say. And David Adams is the president and CEO of Global Automakers of Canada, of which Honda Canada Incorporated is a member as well. Hello to both of you. Really good to see you. Thank you for making the time. Flavio, how big of a deal is this potentially?
Well, I think what we're hearing about, and we've seen reports coming out of Japan over the last few months, is the company was considering an investment that not only would be the biggest in Canadian history, but also bigger than the biggest investment we've seen in the U.S. when Ford decided to invest in Tennessee and Kentucky. It's amazing. You know, these are companies that have been here for 4 decades. Potentially deciding that this is the place to do their transition into electrification. They don't make these decisions spuriously. So, it says a lot about Canada, Ontario, and Quebec here.
Yeah, David, I was reading about some of the efforts that have gone on over the past number of months to try and seal these deals. The number of trips, for example, made overseas to try and secure it. How difficult is it to land something like this?
Well, it's very difficult. As Flavio alluded to, there's international competition, primarily from the U.S. The U.S. has a lot of programs in place to try and lure this investment to the United States as opposed to Canada. I would say Canada was actually ahead of the game in terms of luring investment until we had initiatives like the Inflation Reduction Act come into place in the U.S., but very difficult. But I think, as Flavio said, it's a testimony to the two ministers, primarily Minister Fedeli and Minister Champagne, federal and provincial level. They've been running across the globe to lure these types of investments. And the personal relationships I think that they've developed have actually assisted and have paid off in this regard. They've been like dogs with a bone in terms of trying to lure this investment, and it's paid off. And as Flavio said, it's most significant investment we've ever had in the automotive industry, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens later this week.
David mentioned, Flavio, the Inflation Reduction Act, and so much of what's happened in the past year has been, Canada essentially responding to these massive subsidies that Joe Biden and the White House have put on the table in order to spur green investment in the United States. If not for the IRA, do you think a deal this big would be on the table at this juncture?
Well, I'm going to throw you a curveball. I don't think this is an IRA matching deal. I think we heard Chrystia Freeland say a few months ago, there's no more money for those IRA matching deals. And in the last budget last year, they put in this clean tech investment credit, a real credit on the capital investment. And then we saw snuck into the budget last week a 10% kicker on that says if you're a company that makes cars, batteries, and cathode active materials, we can give you another 10% tax credit on your buildings. And I said last week that applies to a very short list of very, very big companies. I think what we're going to hear this week is that the governments, both levels of government, are able to land a deal this big without matching that controversial structure that a whole bunch of us, including David and I, have spent the last year defending. I think in this instance, the federal tax credits are a differentiator from what the Biden administration is doing, and it appears that they've landed this on credits, which is amazing.
Yeah, let me just follow up with you on that, because you're right to use the term controversial, right? There's a lot of questions from Canadians about, at this point, the value of billions of dollars of their money essentially being put up for big corporations. Your impression is that this won't be one of those announcements where they say we've got $20 billion we're handing to Honda.
Well, I'll come on your show and resign if they've done a battery deal like they did with Volkswagen. I mean, I wouldn't know how to do my job if I hear the government say we can't do those deals anymore, and send David and I out to try to find new prospects and then go do it again. This is the most surprising part of this will be the structural change, and it is the government listening to everybody having to go out there and defend performance-based production subsidies. And then also, hey, by the way, we had to defend a $40 billion deficit in this last presented budget. So they can't go out there and keep doing these deals. We've all heard that, and we've been going out there telling prospective companies and investors, look at the tax credits, get somebody smarter than me to convert that into what that actually means to offset your capital investment and see if it works. And it appears to have worked here.
David, is that your impression as well, that the tax credits are enough to sway that there doesn't need to be a multi-billion-dollar investment put up front?
Well, I think if you look at the entire history of Honda's involvement in Canada, they were the first Japanese automaker here in the mid-'80s. And, there's always been government support of one level or another in terms of all of these deals. And I think the reality is that, as a nation, we have to appreciate that if we want an automotive industry in Canada, then that's going to require some sort of some assistance and partnership with governments at all levels. And I think that's what we're seeing here today. The structure is a little bit different, as Flavio alluded to, but the reality is that there's strong support from both levels of government, and that's going to continue to be the case as we move forward. And I think as far as the future goes, we've actually been reinventing the automotive industry, because it wasn't that many years ago that Flavio and I were witnessing the decline of the automotive industry and perhaps its elimination. And I think with these investments over the last few years, probably upwards of $40 billion, we've seen a resurgence. So we just need to make sure that we continue to take advantage of not only the production, but building out the processing capability in Canada, alluding to that whole value chain proposition that you talked about at the beginning, Vassy.
And David, let me just follow up with you, and I'll get both of you to weigh in on this before we conclude, because I think Canadians will have read some headlines over the past number of weeks, maybe even the last month, talking about a decline in demand. That demand essentially isn't increasing at the pace it was even last year for EVs. And they're, I think, sitting there wondering, is this the future that we've been told it is? What is your take? How would you respond to that, David?
Well, I would respond by saying that there's three things I know that are very important in auto sales. It's consumer, consumer, and consumer. And it really does come down to how the consumer is going to respond to these new offerings in the marketplace. I think the reality is that we've got the commitments being made to produce these products, but we also need, and we've got zero-emission vehicle mandates that are requiring manufacturers to sell these products. But we've got to have that supporting ecosystem built out as well. And what I mean by that is we need a continuation of the incentives until there's price parity in the marketplace. And we also need to provide consumers with assurance that they can charge their vehicle anywhere that they want to, whenever they need to. And right now, that last part isn't a given. And we're trying to work with governments, again, at both levels, as well as the private sector, to ensure that we can provide that assurance to consumers.
Flavio, last word to you on that. I'm about to interview the Environment Minister live, who is responsible in part for setting those targets that David just referenced. They did extend the incentives in the budget by a few more years and some hundreds of millions of dollars. What are your final thoughts on sort of how you would address Canadians who are worried we're kind of parking our entire car in a place that may not be as viable as we thought it was?
I think the entire industry and every major market knows where we're headed. The debate is over how long it's going to take. And you've got the guy on the hot seat in Canada here who has put a more aggressive timeline than even the Americans. I don't think we're going to get there on the Canadian timeline. But, there's no doubt in my mind that Canadians are going to be in battery electric vehicles or hybridized vehicles or other fuel cell or zero emission vehicles in the decades to come. And it's important to make these bets early, because if you decide to pause and be a little bit more conservative, you're going to be on the outside looking in. We did that for decades here. We've changed the pace here, and we've all got to be big boys and girls and defend our major decisions.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. I appreciate both of you making the time for the conversation. Thank you so much. Flavio Volpe is the president of the Canadian Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, and David Adams is the president and CEO of Global Automakers of Canada.